everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Claire and I'm so happy you're here. And today I'm going to be doing my September wrap up. So this month I actually did a relatively good job. I'm pretty proud of what I did. I ended up reading 6 books, technically 7 because I did end up DNFing a book, but so 6 fully completed. I started 7. Yeah, this was a really good reading month for me. I have been having some wanting to do booktube and wanting to really get into my bookish social media. So I did that. I started a book Twitter. I started using my Goodreads a lot more and things like that, and I feel like it kind of paid off for me because I did do a lot better with my reading than I have throughout the rest of the year. So let's just jump into all of the books that I read this month. So my first book that I read this month was Caraval. This is by Stephanie Garber. It is the first book in a trilogy, and I had been going back and forth on picking this book up for quite a while. For a few years, I think at this point, I've been going back and forth on, should I pick this up, should I not pick this up? And then I finally ended up doing it this month. I picked it up while I was on vacation. I was on vacation in the final week of August into the first week of September. I read this in one sitting, about 4 hours on the beach in Florida, where I inevitably ended up getting so sunburned because I didn't put sunscreen on. And I was so invested that I didn't want to have to go and put sunscreen on. And I ended up getting so incredibly sunburnt. But it was worth it. I actually really loved this book. I gave it a 4-star. I really loved the characters. I thought they were really intriguing. I'm super excited to get into the second book of the series. And I have the original series, and I have the first book of I don't know if it's a companion series or what it's considered, the Once Upon a Broken Heart. But I do have the first book of that, so that I can go into it as soon as I finish up with this original trilogy. And also, this was my first kind of real foray into fantasy as someone who is very much a realistic and romance fiction reader. This was my first real jump into fantasy, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was really fun. I thought that the fantasy was fantastical enough, but also not so much that it kind of scared me, I guess, going into it. So yeah, this is a really fun one for someone who wants to get into fantasy but hasn't been able to bring themselves to do it. This was my gateway, and I've got so many fantasy books that I want to read now because of this being my gateway into it. So yeah, this one was Caraval. So next up, I ended up watching some Destiny Sidwell and Sarah Caroli, and they both ended up talking about this book. So I just wanted to go pick it up because they both had really good things to say about it, and that is The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Now this is kind of given the, what is the right word, nickname of Criminal Minds meets teenagers. So a teenage Criminal Minds. And that is I guess a good way to describe it. It essentially follows our main character, Cassie, who is a part of this program called The Naturals, which she ends up being put into at the beginning of this book because she's a profiler. So she can read people extremely easily. She can look at someone and tell you, their name, if they're in a relationship, what car they drive, what job they do. She's just very good at reading people like that. And she kind of has a personal connection to this FBI organization, The Naturals, that she's put into because her own mother went missing when she was 12, I believe, if that's correct off the top of my head. Her mom went missing when she was 12, and the FBI has still not been able to solve her case all of these years later, now that she's 17. And so she is called into this program, and their whole thing is that they work on cold cases. So they're not working on new cases. They're just working on those cold cases until a cold case kind of starts to look surprisingly similar to a current case the FBI is working on. Similarly to Caraval, this was my first real jump into mystery reading, and I wouldn't really consider this a thriller. I would more just consider this like a straight up mystery type of book. And it was one that I absolutely loved. I ended up giving it a 4-star. I loved our main character. The only thing I really would say about this book, and I've read the first 2, which we're about to talk about the second one, is the love triangle is just like a lot, and I don't think it was completely necessary. And that is someone who is a romance girly through and through. I love a good romance. But there's already so much going on in these books, and these are not very long. I believe this one was only about 300. Let me check now that I've given it a number. I believe it's only around, yeah, it's not even 300 pages. It's 308, excuse me. It's 308 pages, so it's a short little book, but yet you're also trying to throw romance on top of a criminal investigation, on top of developing 5 characters, everything else. It just felt like a lot thrown on top of each other for this book, which led to it not getting a 5-star from me. But this was one that I absolutely loved, and as soon as I finished it up, I actually ended up going and picking up the rest of the series, so I have all 4. So yeah, this was a really fun one. Another thing, similar to Caraval, if you want to get into mystery and you haven't yet, this is a good one to pick up. It still has a bit of a kind of gory elements, but it is kind of more toned down than what I would expect from like an adult mystery. So yeah, definitely recommend. And if you like The Inheritance Game, which is her other series, then this would also be a great one for you to pick up. And then swiftly following after The Naturals, I almost immediately went into Killer Instinct by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is book 2 of the Naturals series. Kind of a similar premise, still working with the FBI and working on these cold cases. And again, very similarly to the first book, we're seeing a case that is currently happening that is a copycat of an old case. This book, even though we are following Cassie, I would have really liked to have followed Dean, who is another character in the book, because this book relates a lot more to Dean than Cassie, in my opinion. Maybe you would disagree with me. But this one, I feel like I also gave a 4-star, so it didn't go down any for me personally. But again, the romance. Why? Not every YA young adult book needs a romance in it, in my personal opinion. But I did like this one a lot more. I was not able on either of these, I forgot to say it for The Naturals, but on either of these I was not able to guess the plot twist, which is always exciting for me as someone who is relatively good at guessing plot twists and stuff. I was not able to guess the plot twist for this one, which was very exciting. So I was really in it and really loving the storyline as it played out. There were a couple of things that felt too convenient in this book that kind of pulled me out of it for a while, but then it would just bring me right back in. I mean, I don't know. I really love the way that Jennifer Lynn Barnes writes. I feel like it's very snappy, and like I think that like writing really beautifully intricate made sentences is not a bad thing. Obviously, like Stephanie Garber, I think she's really good at writing really beautiful prose. But the problem is that like that type of story like Caraval with that really beautiful prose makes sense. If this had like a Caraval-esque like sentence in it when Stephanie Garber goes like crazy with her beautiful prose, I would have been completely thrown out of it, because this is a like mystery, but it's also a realistic mystery, It's not supposed to be fancy, it's not supposed to be pretty, it's supposed to be gritty, it's supposed to be raw, and that's exactly what this book did. And I think the writing style is absolutely perfect for it. And I'm filming a video right now where my grandma is choosing my TBR, so I haven't been able to jump to the third and fourth book of this series, but I am waiting with like such patient and bated breath when I get to go back in and finish off this series, because I absolutely loved it. And yeah, so right now the series is sitting at a 4 overall, but like I said, 2 more books, we'll have to see where it goes from there. So next, I don't have the book with me, but I read Night Shift by Annie Crown. I actually ended up getting an early access ARC from it, and it was not what I expected it to be. It was, I don't know how to explain it. It was my first time ever reading a more explicit book, if you will. And I didn't really like it. I'm not big for intimate scenes, I guess. I usually just kind of skim over them and just hope that I didn't miss any important plot things when I read more intimate things. And this book was kind of full of them. But I really liked the 2 main characters when they weren't doing the explicit things. I thought they were really intriguing and really interesting. I would have liked to have gotten more of the 2 of them just kind of hanging out, as opposed to them doing things like they were. So it ended up getting a 3-star from me, which might seem like a lot considering that I just said that like this was an explicit book and I don't like explicit books. But for a first time explicit book experience, I really liked it. Or I didn't really like it, but like I enjoyed it. And I really like the 2 characters, and I really wish we would have gotten more development from the 2 of them instead of them just being intimate for the entire thing. So next we're going to move into Sadie, which I have a copy of. I just don't know where it went. I like that this has just turned into me being like, I don't know where my books are. But Sadie was actually really disappointing for me. It was the first book that my grandma chose for me for my month of letting my grandma choose my TBR. And I was really disappointed in it. I was really excited to give it another chance because I had tried to read it before and ended up DNFing it. And I was like, I'm going to give it a second chance. And I did give it a second chance. I did finish it. But I didn't like it. I only gave it a 2-star. The ending was so unsatisfying because I understood this book to be a revenge story, and maybe that was me just completely misunderstanding the point, but with this book being a revenge story, the ending is so unsatisfying for a revenge story, in my personal opinion. And maybe you can disagree with me. I know that there's apparently a novella that's called like Hello from Sunny Los Angeles, I think. That apparently is supposed to be more of a concrete ending. Why do I have to suffer through an entire book this time to get my like satisfying ending in a novella that I don't even know how to get a hold of it, you know? So, it was a 2 out of 5 for me. I enjoyed the podcast perspective. I did not like Sadie. I did not enjoy her point of view. I thought that she was annoying and boring, and if the book would have been the podcast all the way through, I may have liked it better. But yeah, so Sadie ended up with a 2 out of 5 for me. So next we have my only DNF of the month, and that is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, and I don't have my copy with me. I don't remember where I put it, I'm gonna be completely honest. I got about 100-ish pages in, and I just can't do it. I cannot handle it, girlies. I don't know why this book I just couldn't do it. I don't know why. I gave it as much of a chance as I could, And, like, before people come into the comments, I'm just gonna tell you now, the argument of, well, you have to get to page 233 before it gets great. I shouldn't have to struggle through 232 pages to get to 233 for the last 100 pages to be good. You know, like, I've never understood that argument about books. Like, oh, you have to get through the first 20 pages and then it's gonna be great. It's like, then why should I have to struggle through the first 20 pages? Why did she not just make it great from the beginning? You know? So that's kind of my feeling on A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I had given it a chance before, and I stopped even less into it. I think I only stopped at about like 20 or 30 pages. But when I got to page 100 and I still was bored out of my mind at this book and felt weird about, like, they're fae, but yet they turn into werewolves. And, like, I don't think all of them can do that. And yet, like, I think they also, some of them have, like, special powers that isn't turning into wolves, which really threw me off. And then I realized that, like, our main character is, like, 17, or, like, I think she's, like, 18 or 19. I was about to say 17. She's not underage. I know that. She's, like, 18 or 19, and then, like, our main character, or, like, the main love interest that I assume she's gonna have is, like, 500, which, like, super threw me off. I was like, whoa, 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 okay. So I think in fantasy, I'm gonna have to be kind of careful about my reading of, like, younger women and men with a lot older romantic partners, because that, like, really threw me off and kind of made me feel icky for the rest of the reading experience I had with this book. So like I said, it was a DNF. I don't have a ranking for it because I DNF'd it. But it was the only one that I had this month, and this was one that my grandma chose for me to read. Next, we move on to Grandma's first winner of my Choosing My TBR challenge, which was I Was Born for This by Alice Oseman. Now, I've read Alice Oseman before. I've read Radio Silence. I read it back in 2018, and I've read Solitaire, and I read Loveless. I got Loveless while I was in the UK. I ended up picking it up because I was staying in Durham, and the book takes place in Durham, so I thought that was cool. But this one I absolutely loved. I ended up giving it a 4-star. I really loved the critique on, like, fandom culture, because I know that Alice Oseman, as someone who is, like, I believe she's 29, so she would have been on the internet, like, around the prime age of the, like, One Direction era in 2013. So yeah, because she would have been 19, so yeah, she would have been, like, right there in, like, that cusp era of One Direction fandom, especially because she's from the UK. So she got to see, like, band fandom culture, like, at its finest, at, like, the proper age for it. I really loved the dual POVs. I really loved that our character, Angel here, gave us more of, like, the cautionary tale, if you will. Kind of was the more pushing the moral of the story character, while Jimmy was more of, like, a story character, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like I was a lot more intrigued by Jimmy's story, but I don't think that I would have been as impacted by the book if I didn't have Angel's perspective as well. And I'm a Lister girly, for anyone who's read this book. I'm a Lister girly through and through. I love that boy. I think he's, like, so intriguing to me as a character, and I went through and I found, like, a couple of little novellas, and there's actually a novella in the back of this book that is called Ghosted, that I also really, really loved. I'm not going to say what and where it takes place, because that would be a huge spoiler for this book. But I did really love this one. It got me back into my, like, wheelhouse of reading. A nice contemporary fiction. Not really a romance, actually, which I really enjoyed. There were, like, a couple of bits of, like, characters being in relationships, but it wasn't, like, a getting together story, which I really liked kind of that. I took a break from romances for a second and just, like, enjoyed a nice little contemporary fiction that had a really good message behind it. And I even tweeted out, like, there are some people on the internet who I think need to read this book and like take the message to heart. But yeah, this was one that was super, super fun, and it actually ended out my September reading. So that is it. That was my September reads for September of 2023, and I really enjoyed this reading month. Obviously, like, a DNF is not always like the most fun, but I didn't fall into a reading slump, and I remember once I got into asking my grandma for like recommendations, I kept being like, okay grandma, we have to film so I can get to reading. Like, I was like pushing and pressuring her to film with me so that I could get into my next book, and I'm really hoping that's going to carry out for the rest of the year, because I have hit 15 books read in this year and I'm trying to get to 50. I don't know if that's going to happen. I'm going to have to like really speed up my reading time if I'm going to hit the 50, but I feel like this is the best like fighting chance I've had in quite a long time to actually hit my reading goal, and I really do think it's because of like being on the internet more and being in a like book community and interacting with people on book Twitter and posting on there and posting on my Instagram and stuff like that. So yeah, this has been a really fun month, and I'm super excited to see what October brings. So I will talk to you guys next time. Bye!